Hey guys, welcome to Bookish Islander. My name is Juan and today I'm going to talk to you about the picture of Dorian Gray. So let me set the scene for you. We're in Victorian England, so we're towards the end of the 19th century. There's an aristocrat that goes by the name of Lord Henry Wotton. He sees the portrait that his friend, an artist called Basil Hallward, has painted of a young man with whom he's infatuated, and that young man is Dorian Gray. Later, upon meeting him, Lord Wotton, or Lord Henry, tells Dorian that beauty is the only thing in life that matters. Nothing else matters, only beauty. The problem is that beauty is fleeting. Beauty does not last. So even though Dorian is now beautiful, that's not going to last at all. That is the moment where Lord Henry begins to corrupt young Dorian. Up until that moment, we don't know anything about Dorian and about his life, but we are led to assume that he's an innocent, naive, beautiful young thing that knows nothing about life. And at that moment on, he becomes tortured by the idea of becoming old, and therefore, the way he sees it, the way that Lord Henry has explained it to him, ugly. Dorian then begins this process of becoming gradually more and more corrupt until he becomes downright evil. But what nobody knows within the novel is that while his beauty becomes, or rather remains intact, the portrait becomes older, becomes uglier. All the signs of aging are reflected on the portrait and not on Dorian's body. And even the signs of his moral corruption, which is, and even the crimes that he commits are shown on the portrait and not on his body. And years go by. Later in the novel, Dorian makes a confession to his friend Basil, the painter. And it goes like this. "Years ago, when I was a boy," said Dorian Gray, crushing the flower in his hand, "you met me, flattered me, and taught me to be vain of my good looks. One day, you introduced me to a friend of yours, who explained to me the wonder of youth, and you finished a portrait of me that revealed to me the wonder of beauty. In a mad moment, that even now I don't know whether I regret or not, I made a wish. Perhaps you would call it a prayer." This was my second encounter with this novel. I studied Oscar Wilde's works back in university years ago, and I had to read some of his plays, and then on my own accord, I picked up the Picture of Dorian Gray and read it, and I remember liking it. Reading it this time, I was confronted with a Victorian novel that is perhaps too wordy. That's not its fault, it's a sign of the time in which it was written and published. But, I hadn't read a Victorian novel in a while, so this kind of took me aback for a moment, and I got tired of all the lush, sensual descriptions of the novel. But I was fascinated by its central story, by its commentary on morality, on beauty, and so many ideas, that are relevant to us today. If you think about Instagram, for instance, and, the whole social network phenomenon, the Picture of Dorian Gray is as pertinent now as it was in the 19th century, I think. I still found it an enjoyable experience. It's not a hard book to get around, to get through at all. And the only problem is, like I said, all the wordiness and that, which is just a Victorian thing. But yeah, I thought the text was fresh, and the only, I think, problem I had with it in terms of the narrative is that all the a lot of the moral corruption of Dorian Gray we're not really privy to. It's almost taken as a given, you know. I would have liked more detail, more description of the things that he got up to that throughout the years, you know. It seemed to me like it's a very, despite its wording, it's a very condensed narrative, I think. That was at least my impression reading it for the second time. I don't know what you guys think if you've read it. So The Picture of Dorian Gray was written by Oscar Wilde, the Irish author who lived in England, and it was first published in July 1890 as part of a magazine called the Lippincott's Monthly Magazine. So it was in the July issue of that year, 1890. But this version was censored by the publisher, and this censorship was unbeknownst to Wilde. He only realized upon publication, and of course he wasn't pleased with it. Despite the censorship, the novel caused a minor scandal in Victorian society, mostly due to, believe it or not, its homoeroticism. They didn't seem to have a problem with the murder and, you know, murders that take place in the novel or anything like that. It was the homoeroticism that good and proper Victorian society objected to, or at least part of it. There was a revised edition that was published the following year in 1891. And, well, this is the novel as it's come to us, is it's in this later form. There was also an edition published in 2000 that is completely uncensored. I haven't read that one, and because I wanted to read the more canonical text, the text that I would have read in college, and you know, that most people are familiar with and would have read. But I don't know if you've read the version that came out in 2000. Would you recommend that I do so too? What do you think of Oscar Wilde? What do you think of The Picture of Dorian Gray? Let's have a discussion down below in the comments, because I think this is a rich text, fascinating read, and I think I've just only shown you the very tip of the iceberg here. So thanks for watching as always, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye bye.